Yes, I have a short back and sides and a G-Shock watch, both telltale signs of a life spent in the military. I tried growing my hair and it was the worst week of my life. The G-Shock tells good time, so they're staying. One of the first things they did during training was to make us write a list of our reasons for joining and put it up on the wall as a reminder of why we were there. I wrote down on that paper that I signed up to fight for people that couldn't fight for themselves. That has rung true throughout my military career and is one of the reasons as to why I have served for as long as I did. I served for 15 years in the Australian Defence Force. I started my career with the intention of becoming a naval clearance diver. The clearance diver course is physically and mentally grueling. Brutal sleep deprivation. Rolling from one physically and mentally demanding activity to another by day and by night. When my time came, I was ready and prepared. The clearance diver course was the most challenging thing I had done to that point in my life. I loved every minute of it. The men I trained with became like brothers, some of whom remain that way even till this day. We endured pain and hardship together, and through that, bonds of friendship were strengthened. I was in the last few months of the course when a diving injury left me permanently medically unfit to dive. I was out. Within a day I was bounced back to my old unit, to my old mundane job, to my old mundane life. I was lost. The only reason I had joined in the first place was to be a clearance diver. The focus of my last 2 years had been training for that position. When I went to the march out for the men on my course and watched them all receive their berets, I was broken inside. I felt incomplete and hollow. I didn't know it at the time. Looking back now, that's about the time things inside me started to change. I needed direction. I needed an end state. I needed a goal. I reassessed my options, and after a period, I decided to aim higher. I set my sights on transferring to the army and training for Special Forces selection. The next 4 years were dedicated to training and preparing for a shot at joining Special Forces. Each year when SF selection rolled around, I would put my paperwork in. I finally got my crack. Even better was that I would be doing it with the men I'd been training with. Men who I had again formed an unbreakable bond and friendship with. Clearance diving was a walk in the park compared to SF selection. There are no words to explain the pain, both physical and mental, that one must endure. It's all voluntary. You can make the pain stop at any time, which only makes it harder. They give you a piece of paper to carry around. It's an application for voluntary withdrawal, so you always have it on you. I ripped mine up on day one and stuffed it into my pack so it wasn't an option. I more than held my own as I watched men dropping around me like flies. Then it happened. While lifting 2 20-kilo water jerrys with a 60-kilo pack on my back, something popped. My lower back went into spasms and I almost blacked out. After coming to, I lasted another 18 hours. I was constantly fighting the urge to pass out with pain. The clincher came when they gave us a rest for 5 minutes. I got down, but I never got back up. I physically couldn't stand. I was medically removed there and then. Once again, I was out. Here I was, several years into my career, and I had achieved nothing. This was amplified and reinforced when I again went to see my friends receive their berets as they were inducted into the Special Forces community. I never fully came back from that. The rest of my career was a blur of indecision, searching and treading water. Over time I sank further and further into a black hole, but I didn't even realise it was happening. I was an angrier, moodier, less present human being all around. Naturally affected my role as a husband and a father also. My now ex-wife suffered my moods. Her and the kids followed me loyally, albeit begrudgingly, sometimes as I bounced around various jobs and locations in the army. I can't remember when I started thinking about suicide as an option. It was insidious, so gradual that I barely paid attention to it. At first it was more like a dark humour, but then it grew into something more. At no stage did I talk to anybody about it. At no stage did I ask for help. I couldn't. After all, that would be weak. Dark humour became regular thoughts. On the inside, I became more distant from everybody. On the outside, I just smiled and waved. No one was the wiser. My wife knew that I had become moodier and less present, and it was something that was discussed. Of course, I just put it down to being tired, working hard, a little bit stressed. I felt we had grown apart. I felt that I was holding her back from her own career. I felt that in my own failings in life, I had also failed her as a husband and my children as a father. This sent me further into my self-imposed abyss. I asked her for a divorce and we agreed to separate. This brought about its own level of stress. We both said things that hurt the other. It was during this bitter period that I hit rock bottom. I couldn't feel anymore. No pain. No anger. Nothing. Still, I didn't talk to anyone. I never asked for help. So there I was, sitting in my car, on the side of the road, tears streaming down my face. Just a complete shell of a human being. I was done. It was over. I couldn't feel anything, and I couldn't see a future. I was a burden on my wife. I was a failure as a father. In 15 years I had achieved nothing. There was no point going on. It was then that I decided to do something I'd never dared consider before. I decided to reach out. I decided to ask for help. I called one of my oldest friends, one of the men who had made it through Special Forces selection, who had fought countless of his own demons and had come out the other end. A brother I owe my life to today. We talked. I cried. He knew how I felt. He had been there himself. Now something happened during this talk. The more I talked about where I was and what I felt, the better I felt, the less burdened I felt, the lighter I felt, like a weight had literally been lifted off my shoulders simply by talking and reaching out. It was there, in this darkest of moments, that I learned that it is okay to seek help. Had I not, then things would have turned out differently, not just for me, but for everybody. I used to think that people who committed suicide were weak, that it was a weak option, that it was selfish, and guess what? It is. But until you're in that place, until you are so low, and so black, and so empty that there is no light, then you can't understand. I have told you my story because you need to hear it. My hope is that this will somehow give you permission to talk openly about your own demons, to admit you were in that place, that you needed help.